You're watching Wilmington on CBS 10 WILM. Here's your host, Don Ansell.
All right, we're back. Our guests, Alex Dale, chair of the New Hanover County Republican Party. Sandra Sheridan is part of the executive committee of the New Hanover County Democratic Party. I said we'd talk about Arlen Specter. Alex, what's your take on his defection from the Republican Party to the Democrats?
Well, I think it's a political move. I understand he's explained it to be an ideological move, but I think we all recognize that he's up for re-election in 2010, and he was doing this because it's politically expedient for him.
Is that unique in politics? I mean, don't most politicians think about getting elected?
They do, and this is actually not uncommon at all. It's happened
on both sides of the aisle.
On both sides of the aisle. It's happened a number of times. What's maybe more significant about this one is because of how it impacts the numbers in the Senate and the ability to have, depending on what happens in Minnesota, the ability to have a filibuster-proof Senate. And so it's maybe more historic in the context of what else is around it. But it happened in 2001. It's happened well before that. It's a very common thing for people who are more concerned about protecting their career than what's good for their country.
Sandra, your take?
Well, first of all, Arlen Specter made no bones about that he looked at his polls. He made a conclusion that he did not think that with his moderate stance in the Republican Party that it was being embraced by his party, and that he
was worried about the primary fight.
Yes, and that
the Republican primary
he
fight.
would not necessarily come out on top in the Pennsylvania primary, which again suggests to me that the Republican Party has some issues that they need to deal with within their own house, just like the Democrats did in previous years before we got back into power. It's a cycle, and we know every party goes through it. However, at this particular time, it's the Republicans' time. I believe that Michael Steele and other prominent Republicans could have probably courted him to feel that he was comfortable in his own party and able to be successful in the primary. Obviously, that's not what he felt was the case, and one of the things that we can say is, even though he's been a Republican for 40 years, maybe he decided to wake up and return back to his roots since he started out as a Democrat.
Alex, what does that do to the Republicans' ability to influence the agenda in Washington?
Well, it certainly will have a significant impact if the Minnesota race turns out the way it's looking like it will turn out. With the his name escapes me, the former Saturday Night Live writer, Al Franken, thank you. If that shakes out the way it's looking like it'll shake out, it will have a huge impact. And I think that's what's probably most troubling about it. And I think, Sandra mentioned that this is cyclical. There were talks the Democratic Party was falling apart back when Newt Gingrich was around, and also talks of that in the early Bush administration. So it is cyclical, and I think I like a primary. It doesn't happen all the time, especially at the local level, but at a primary, you help refine and define your voice and your message, and I think that's important. So I hate that he was concerned about a primary, and I think he may get a primary in the Democratic, from the Democratic Party in Pennsylvania.
Sandra, how do you answer the critics that say that the administration is expanding the role of government to levels that undermine our system?
I think that is a valid concern for many people, although I do believe that sometimes to control the problem, you have to take the bull by the horn. Obviously, I think when it comes to the bank bailouts, when it comes to the automobile industry, they have had many years to deal with their own financial situations and to make them stable. Obviously, they proved that they have not been able to have the means to do so, and they sought the government's help. I think we have to look at not just the big execs, but I think we have to look at the everyday people that are impacted. And despite the fact that government may be expanded, I do believe that we would definitely destroy the American economy if your average person is unable to continue to live in a manner that can support their family, to maintain a job, and to be able to move forward from day to day.
Alex, what about the charges that Obama's a socialist?
His comments last night, I think, were trying to distance himself from that, the comments of, I don't want to take over these industries. But the reality is, we've followed this principle that now the FDIC chair person is now saying is flawed, that the idea that something is too big to fail. And so we've put money into, AIG, we've put money into the automakers, and I think that is increasing the role of government far beyond what government ought to be, far beyond what our founding fathers thought it would be, and I think far beyond what a large number of the people think it ought to be, including...
You think we should have been left to fail?
I think certain industries, you have to look at, I think Sandra's right, you have to look at what ordinary people and how they're impacted. And I think you look at how ordinary people throughout our country are impacted. And they're going to be the people paying the bill for the failures of these people up in the auto industry. And I think you have to look at the fact that they're going to be charged taxes for years to pay for what we've dumped into these companies that now are going to fail.
But how do you support the fact that Henry Paulson laid out all of this under the Bush administration? I mean, he was basically your primary architect of bank bailouts. And we were, before the election was even over, listening to him speak pretty much daily, talking about, if we didn't act immediately, what was going to happen within the next couple of days or the next couple of weeks, and, if we didn't get this legislation passed. So when we talk about Congress and the Bush administration, would you not think that at that particular time that all of these economists that were supporting the idea that, we're spending too much would have come in and provided some insight to their own party who was willing to do something at that time?
We're back to the economists who you can find both sides of the fence.
Yeah.
But I think, I think what you're saying is there is a huge difference to me in the money needed for the banks to free up capital than there is in putting money into various industries, from auto industry to insurance. I think that's a big difference.
I want to move on because
Okay.
I've got like 2 minutes and like 12 minutes of questions. What about the growing controversy on whether to investigate the previous administration's policy on enhanced interrogation techniques? It's a fancy phrase. Torture is what they're talking about. Is there any question on whether some of that was done was indeed torture?
What do I think of investigating it further? Or do I think it's...
Well, let's start with... Yeah,
let me go with that.
All right.
I'll go with that. Do we think it ought to be investigated further? I think the release of the interrogation memos was a bad idea. I think, first of all, it's a very one-sided release. And the president has made, he's made statements about the fact that it can be acquired through, the information can be acquired through other means. Well,
he said he didn't know if it could be
acquired. I'm sorry.
All right, we just have a minute. Your take?
Okay, I definitely agree that it was torture. It violates all the rules of the Geneva Convention, and we've held other countries accountable for acts that we have condoned.
Yeah, and I don't agree with the policy either, but at the same time, I don't think you go and release interrogation memos to the public, regardless of if you agree with it or not. You change the policy and move ahead.
Were you in favor of the Iraqi troop drawdown?
I think there's a time to end a war, and I think that needs to happen, but...
Yes.
You were?
I think it needs to happen.
Yeah.
I just don't want to broadcast how we do it before we do it.
I can't believe we're out of time. I've got so much more I want to cover. Well, that's going to have to do it for this edition of Byline. If you'd like to catch Byline online, go to WILM-TV.com. I'm Don Ansel for Byline Wilmington. We'll see you next week.
Been watching Byline Wilmington on CBS 10 WILM. Join us every Sunday morning at 11 as we explore the issues that concern you.